earlier on this week, we saw the full extent of the crimes committed by a group of people who we call the Rolex Rippers, who have stolen now almost £4 million worth of luxury watches from the streets of London. Now, it's impossible not to state the obvious when we look at these images of the perpetrators. Most of them are young black men, and it brings me absolutely no pleasure at all to state that fact. We've got to ask the question, why does it appear that so many young black Brits are drawn to lives of crime? I am sick and tired of seeing images strewn across the press of young black men who are either victims of awful knife crimes, perhaps they've been murdered, or they've committed crimes themselves. I think it's absolutely awful, and I want an end to it. I've been mugged several times in my life. Each and every time I've been mugged by fellow young black men. I've also spoken to many other people about muggings that they have experienced, and 9 times out of 10, they have been mugged by young black men too. Now, we know from statistics that over 50% of gun crimes, robberies and other serious crimes have been accused against young black men. But we do also know that actually when a lot of these cases go to court, more than double of those cases brought against young black men are thrown out of court over young white men. So perhaps there is some injustice in the system. But we've got to ask the question, why is this happening so much? Is it because we're not funding public services properly? Is it because of poor housing? Is it because of the way that young black men interact with institutions like education and policing? Or is it something else? Is it because of institutional racism, the left might say? I say, what else could it be? Is there something more fundamental about the black British experience which leads to poor life outcomes? Family structures, single-parent backgrounds, inner-city culture. We know that about 70% of criminals come from single-parent backgrounds. I am from a single-parent background. Not all young black men from single-parent backgrounds are involved in crime or victims of crime, but too many are for my liking, and we need to do something about it. If I can make a plea to the young black men of my generation, it would be to say, please, let us not make the same mistakes that too many of our fathers have made. Do not abandon your children, because I think this is key to ending the overrepresentation of young black men in the criminal justice system. Now, Alex Armstrong, what do you make of all of this?
Look, I totally applaud your statement, and I don't think there is enough young black voices, or just black voices in general, who are talking about this issue openly. We see a lot of the institutional racism, the slavery card being played quite a lot as excuses.
What do you mean the slavery card?
For example, someone will say that I can't get a leg up in life, so therefore I turn to crime because actually the world is institutionally racist, which goes back to slavery. We know that card is played quite a lot. And frankly, I think there needs to be a deep introspection in the black community, and we see it here in the UK, we see it here in America as well, where I think the community needs to come together and start holding itself accountable. And I'm not saying that this is just a black issue, because it's not, actually. It's lots of other lower income ethnic minorities have the same problem too. But they have to really start at a community level if we're going to address them. So I really applaud you for saying that. You know, first of all, it's quite brave, because I know you're going to get a lot of stick from other young black people who disagree with you and may agree with the points that I raised earlier. So, look, from a man who's from a single-parent background as well, it's a very, very hard start to your life, but that's not how it has to be. And there are equal opportunities for everyone in this country, I believe.
Benjamin Butterworth, David Lammy got criticised for saying something very similar to me, essentially saying that fatherlessness in the black community is a contributing factor to the high crime rates that we see in the black community. Do you think that criticism was fair?
I think that it's not as simple as the fact that they're raised in single-parent households. I think it's the lack of respect that a culture where fathers think it's OK to run off to leave their responsibilities. Should it be a surprise that young black men take that as an acceptable way to behave? Not necessarily simply the fact that they're in a single-parent household. But I think, first of all, I don't think I've ever heard in this country, some black 19-year-old that's gone to prison for something blaming slavery. I think that's a very American sort of argument. But what I would say is that I think socioeconomics has a lot to do with this as well, because it is still a much higher proportion, and of course saying black community is a very broad thing because they come from lots of different parts of the world, but the black community still has much higher rates of poverty. Obviously that will be related to a single-parent household, and I think a lot of those that are falling into lives of crime they're not from well-off or middle-class black families. The economics is a strong correlation. The other thing I would say quickly, unless you want to come back.
But 57% of black Caribbean families and 44% of black African families are headed by single-parent households, and yet we see the crime statistics in those communities that we see. Do you not think there's a pretty inexplicable link between those two
Well, there's
things?
a strong correlation across all races between poverty and turning to crime, and it doesn't justify it, but clearly it's one way to help. The final thing I was going to say is that I think the police have a responsibility on this to try and be more inclusive of the black community, because you get these people that from the outset don't want anything to do with the police, don't help the police go about their work. And a journalist called David Wood, who's the crime correspondent at the Times, a former colleague of mine, he is a black man of our age, and he wrote about how he had constantly been stopped and searched since the age of 16, despite being from a very middle-class family in St Albans, being an exemplary member of society, and that had made him feel very fearful and uncomfortable about the police.
But you have nothing to hide. I mean, if you're not carrying a knife,
Have you
it
been
shouldn't be a
stopped and
problem. I have
searched?
actually been stopped and searched once at an airport. I thank you very much, Ben.
In an airport?
Yes, at an airport.
We're all searched in airports,
No, before
Alex.
I got through the gates, Benjamin. No, the point I'm trying to make is this: you can blame the police and you can say it's the police's fault for doing their job, and actually,
But often they're not
we've
doing
seen
their
knife
job.
crime go up when they don't do stop and search. And let's be honest that it is an issue relating to that community. The reality is that there's a glorification of crime in the black community. There's a glorification of it through music. There's a glorification of it through drugs and other misdemeanors as well.
I
will say that we do need that. The community needs to stop glorifying this as a lifestyle, because it has become a lifestyle for a lot of
Yes,
black
it
men.
has become a lifestyle for lots of people. But Darren, on the stop and search question, yes, black people are more likely to be stopped and searched by police, but we also know that the conviction rates after people being stopped and searched for black people are lower. So is it just a case of stop and search reform, or is there something more that the community itself needs to do?
I mean, I read that actually a lot of police officers are saying that they're too scared now to actually stop a black person on the streets.
It is happening more.
If they
It
are,
is happening often, though, Darren. Stop and search is happening to young black
if you ask
men.
me,
They're 5
Albie,
times
it should
more likely
happen
to be
a lot more
searched if
than
you're
it
black.
is. Because
So you think the solution is stop and search?
I do think stop and search is a really important tool in the police's armoury.
More so than family structure?
No, I think family structure is important, but I don't think you can turn around and say, oh, I'm from a fatherless home, so obviously a life of crime is right for me. That's just actually giving people victim narratives. I'm from a working class, single-parent family. I haven't gone around stabbing people or nicking their phones, you know.
What do we do, Belinda, to keep families
briefly,
together?
Belinda.
Well,
Sorry.
very briefly. So Alex mentioned America. Really important studies have been done. In the 1950s and 60s, there were huge amounts of strong black families. In fact, more black women were married than white women. 9% of black children came from single-parent families. Now, up to now, in 2023, it's now 56%. What has gone wrong? Is it because of the colour of their skin? No, it's welfare, welfare, welfare. It has replaced fatherhood in a way that is absolutely stealing from children's lives. They are paying fathers basically not to take their responsibilities of their children. But I would say that everyone, no matter their background or colour, is responsible for their own crimes. No excuse, not even this structural racism stuff. You go to jail if you commit a crime.